Okay, so hello everyone, hello and welcome to Pause and Pivot Cafecito Chat. I'm Margarita V, your host today, and I'm a workplace wellness coach specializing in mental fitness, and I'm a lifelong learner. And my guess is if you're joining today, so are you. So whether you're here with us watching the replay or on YouTube, welcome. Pause and Pivot is a weekly wisdom circle where we explore books, ideas, and conversations that help us live with greater vitality, meaning, resilience, and joy. And each week we love to just gather together and review some big ideas from one new book. And the best part is that we share our insights and lived experiences around the general topics around health and whole person wellness. So our hope here in Cafecito Chat is simple: to encourage more people to read more books, think more deeply, and discover one small idea that can help them move forward with greater awareness, happiness, and intention. So before we begin, if you enjoy these conversations around books, wellness, and flourishing, we'd love for you to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and please consider sharing it with someone who enjoys these thoughtful conversations. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us to continue building this community of lifelong learners. So it's June. Our June Learning Library includes so many wonderful books. Our theme this month is joy, vitality, and living fully. So last week we explored the blue zones, which was an amazing look at all the different areas around the world where all kinds of people and communities are flourishing. And this week our focus is on The How of Happiness by Sonja Lyubomirsky. So today we're going to explore whether happiness can actually be cultivated. This month, we're going to be looking at health and community and happiness. And in this book, Sonja is going to guide us into the science of it. So before we dive into the book, one of my favorite things in our Cafecito Chat community is to welcome our guests and fellow thought partners today, just to check in and say hello. So let's check in with Colin. Hello, Colin. How are you today?
Well, Maggie, how are you?
I'm doing great. I love it. It's so sunny out there. It felt so good to be out there gardening.
Yeah, we're having a blistering 68 degrees here.
Oh my gosh, it's always different. You guys are in the hardy part of the US. So welcome. I'm so glad to be continuing the conversation from last week, which was
Yeah,
about the blue zones. And our idea that we left with was like, we can create our own blue zones of healthy
yes.
vitality and connection. So I'm really excited to dive into this book. I'm curious, what are you most interested to dive into today about this book?
Well, it's kind of an assumption that everybody wants to be happy, right? And I can remember as I moved through the stages from teen to adult, early adulthood, and then my business years, I realized that there are a lot of people who are just not happy. I mean, just not happy. And and even when you talk to them about some people think they're happy, but they're not happy. And so when you introduced the book, sent me the info and stuff, I looked at it. There are actually some really surprising things that we're going to discuss today. So I'm looking forward to it.
I know, I know. Don't give it up yet. Don't
You
give them
know,
the secrets.
see, I'm so tempted to start talking about what I want to talk about, but I'll wait.
Awesome. You're so awesome. Okay, so it's great to have you here. And as always, here in Cafecito Chat, what we'd like to do is just do a really quick book overview, introduce you to the author, their amazing work, and then we'll dive into some three big ideas where we'll just share some of our ideas as they come up in our life and what we think about them. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be looking at the book, The How of Happiness by Sonja Lyubomirsky. It's a scientific approach to getting the life you want. As we mentioned for June, our theme is to look at the general idea of joy, vitality, and living fully. We've already reviewed two amazing books, Eat, Move, Sleep in week 1, and then The Blue Zones last week for week 2. So this week we're focusing on The How of Happiness, and next week we're rounding out this month with Flow, a classic by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So, The How of Happiness by Sonja Lyubomirsky. This was published in 2007, so we'll get to that a little bit later. It's become one of the foundational books in the field of positive psychology. It's a big book. It's over 300 pages, plus extensive research references. So we want you to look at this book as it's not a traditional self-help book, but it's written in a way that anyone can pick it up. And if you want to, you can do a deep dive into the back where she has almost like 40 pages of reference articles from the extensive studies and published articles that she's reviewed for this book and for her 18 years of research. So this book is all about the science of happiness, the how, the why, and who with the methods. So this book is going to look at the science of happiness. We're going to look at the idea of the 40% within our control. And then mostly a big idea that Lyubomirsky really emphasizes is that this book represents a whole compilation of evidence-based practices. So these aren't just some hearsay. These are research-based, tested, initial ideas that were leading to how we can pursue happiness. And the overall goal is really about agency. And what we mean by that is our ability and confidence to sort of pursue happiness, and overall an idea of how we can then sustain it. So this book really is this beautiful way to look at the different areas that people can look at for happiness, to understand how we can step in, and overall sort of the real world application. So Sonja Lyubomirsky is one of the world's leading happiness researchers, my friend. She has spent more than 3 decades studying well-being, positive emotions, and flourishing. What I appreciate most about her work is that she doesn't ask, why are people unhappy? Instead, as part of the positive psychology movement, their reframe is more like, why are some people happier than others? That may sound like a small difference, but it's fundamentally changing the entire field by asking new questions, by looking differently at people and environment and procedures. We get new answers. Rather than focusing exclusively on illness and dysfunction, positive psychology asks, what helps people thrive? What helps people flourish? And what contributes to a life well lived? And that's exactly why I love this book and what this book explores. So to learn more about Sonja Lyubomirsky, you can check out her website at sonjalyubormirski.com. Now, we always really offer this idea of why. Why did we pick this book? Why does this book matter? Let's begin with why this conversation matters today. You might have heard some of these statistics already, that perhaps 1 in 5 adults are experiencing some form of mental illness annually. And what Sonja looks at is the kind of number of people that are already more on the neutral to positive scale of happiness and flourishing. And that about 20% of adults are flourishing. What about the rest of us? What about the 80%? She takes a deep dive into the field of depression. She actually dedicates the whole last chapter as a deep dive and recommends people to go into that if they do, in fact, find themselves in that state of mood and being. So we want to definitely look for when we need to get help and reach support. To reach out for support for ourselves or for those loved ones around us, because she really points to the stats that loneliness and disconnection are all around us and rising. As we've seen these ideas in many of our other books as well. So we also want to look at the other side, the positive, the hope of why look at happiness. And so she does go into a lot of the studies and the research of why we want to be happy, and also the changing trends. So one statistic I'd like to say from the book, she compares some studies that were done in the 1960s with college students. So In 1967, approximately 42% of college students reported that it was very important to be well off financially. So that's 42%. But by 2005, that rose to 71%. So there's this trend towards materialism, right? Or sort of this connection of happiness connected to my ability to be financially well off. Then she also looked at the other side of these students and noticed that the decline of the students who were answering that it was a meaningful part of life to have a meaningful philosophy of life. So 86% of students in 1967, 86% of them said having a meaningful philosophy of life was important. Fast track to 2005, that statistic dropped down to 52. So she points out sort of these parallel developments in our society where more of where we're looking and how we're connecting happiness with financial well-being and then with sort of a general idea of meaningful philosophy. So it's interesting how what goes up and what goes down. And so it's these types of trends and studies that she points out and shares in the book. So if you like that, I really hope you pick up the book to dive into many more extensive studies that she's researched. We want to look at the three big ideas. Number one is happiness is cultivated, not found. And the big idea number two is the 40% solution. I won't say any more about that until we dive in. And then big idea three is this amazing concept, maybe my favorite of all of the big ideas in this book, to find your best fit. So with all of these ideas around the book and the amazing work that Sonja Lyubomirsky have been doing for decades now, our question for ourselves is, how can we now be a little more intentional to cultivate greater well-being? So let's circle back with Colin and let's start some of these initial ideas. Colin, what stood out for you?
Excuse me. Well, I'd have to say that, well, there are some really surprising things here. I'm excited for the 40% solution. But the idea that the science has shown, well, I've always believed that your DNA, your environment, your as a child, that has a great amount of influence on your level of happiness. In my own case, I'm the oldest of 7 siblings, and it's very interesting to me to know what the family was going through at different times when each of them were born and how they process life. That makes total sense to me. I have to admit, it was surprising to me that you can cultivate happiness. Now, that it does seem intuitive. If somebody had said that to me, I'd be like, yeah, of course you could do it. But the fact that there's science-based ideas around it, that was surprising. And then that made me think, why are we not all doing these? If people are really chasing happiness, why are they not doing the things that can bring you happiness? Proven scientifically. It's kind of great.
Right. I love that. I love how we just get these new insights or reminders of maybe what we already knew, but they just have more relevance today for us. As we've covered in so many of our other books, the idea is to understand the importance of awareness. Awareness as a skill, as we are living in such really distracted and externally focused lives with all our beautiful technology, the multiple ways in which we're showing up in our different spaces at home and in the workplace, and the level of chronic stress that we tend to live with. All of these can kind of pull us out of this ability to be self-aware, right? So she even noted in her book that some people don't even know when they're happy or when they're not happy. They're just following along. And next week in our book Flow, we're really going to get into that idea of, do you know when you're in a state of high happiness or flow? So yeah, she really does go into this idea of the science of happiness, evidence-based. What does that mean? They do experiments. They test out ideas. Who's happier? And as we saw in the book from last week on, as we're looking at the blue zones around the world, there's different correlations, different reasons. We say reasons because people are happy for different reasons in different places. And so the idea is now being curious of, I wonder What about us right here, right now, in our environment? And so she really loves to share the science, and this says, how does this apply to you? So with that, let's dive into our first idea, which is happiness is cultivated. So with our first idea, happiness is cultivated, not found. Okay, so she's saying it's not just luck. You're not just born into it and then that's it. We have an ability, we have this precious opportunity to become an active participant in creating, in discovering the sources of happiness. So for the most part, this book is about hope, bringing the pathways, the science-backed, evidenced ways of how for some people, certain activities, certain happiness activities can bring them closer to happiness. So the first big point here is happiness does require action. Surprise, right? We can't just have it like appear. So let's just like dawn that idea that it's a part of our self-responsibility, right? So it's one of the central messages of this entire book, that we are a part of it. It's not just the pursuit of happiness. This implies that happiness is somewhere else, somewhere in the future, somewhere where we have not yet arrived, right? So thinking about, we always say, what are our beliefs around this concept? What have I stopped thinking about and been able to look at with new perspective? So her new perspective is to say, it requires action to be present here, and it requires action. And to resist the temptation of believing or putting ourselves in the pursuit of happiness, to always say, I'll be happy when fill in the blank, right? How many of us have done that? When I get that promotion, when I retire, when I lose those 20 pounds, okay? She's like, stop that. Be present, recognize we're here, and let's dive into what research says. So looking beyond just future conditions, she points to the research science around this amazing term. If you've never heard of it, the term is hedonic adaptation. I love this. So imagine we're running on a treadmill, in the gym. So the idea of hedonic adaptation is that human beings are remarkably good at getting used to things. Okay, whether it's a new car, we love it for a year or two, and then we get used to it. The raise that gives us all this new money, pretty soon that becomes normal, right? We start spending more, we start traveling more, and now we're ready for more money. And even marriage, she says, even marriage, according to some studies, there tends to be like a 2-year trend where people kind of raise their baseline of happiness and then they go back to their baseline. And guess what, though? The good news is that the same principle applies when we're trying to adapt or recover from setbacks, losses, and adversity. We adapt. So the hazard, or what she wants us to step away from, is to say, don't get used to it. Just like the treadmill, it's like we kind of have to be in constant kind of changing our activity to keep up with the same impression, the same benefit that these activities are going to give us. Our bodies, just as our bodies adapt, if you're taking care or watching your heart rate monitor as you're working out, your body beautifully adapts, right? It can work harder with less work in the body, right? Your heart rate is lower, you're able to breathe better. So your body is adapting with that extra stress. Same thing happens, right? When we're doing new behaviors, we adapt, which is wonderful. I just think that's amazing to think that our body and our physiology is there as our partner. So this is about tapping into something deeper, recognizing the repetition of what we do every day, that our daily practices matter, beginning with our thoughts, our habits, those healthy habits that we do every day, the relationships that we, connect with every day, how we view ourselves and the world. All of these are different forms and different practices. So Sonja writes that happiness is really something we can be a part of to create, not just something we find. So, thinking about your life, reflecting, we encourage you to write down some notes, grab a wellness journal for each of our recordings, and just jot down what stands out for you, what questions you want to work with. So, today, maybe think about what happiness promises are you still waiting for? And a quote from Sonja is, "There is no happiness without action." I love the simplicity of this quote, right? No happiness without action. It's not enough to have the intention, to stay in the wishing well, to be waiting for that future state. It's to be in action. And I think this is one of the reasons why the book really resonated so strongly with me, because again, it's about giving us hope. So much of what we discuss in positive intelligence in our different groups, it's all about this same idea. Number one, awareness is important, but awareness alone doesn't change our lives. Practice does. In fact, our life is a sequencing of practices. So the focus in this book that Sonja comes back to over and over and over again is happiness requires action. I love it. So Colin, how is this landing with you? Big idea number one. Happiness can be cultivated.
Well, the idea of hedonic adaptation was new. The concept was new, but the reality of it is not new. As soon as I contemplated it, I immediately went to events in my life and I thought, okay, I've had some pretty traumatic events. Did this happen to me? And it did. And I've had some pretty awesome things happen to me, and I adapted to that as well. The thing that really, really gets me, and this is part of my own journey that I'm on right now, is the realization that what she's pointing to is outcomes, results, are things that we naturally adapt to. Oh, that was great. It's like that story we're both familiar with, the Chinese farmer, oh, your horse broke out of the corral. Bummer, bummer, bummer. That was an outcome. And the farmer said, yeah, okay, maybe. And he adapted. And then the horse comes back with a whole herd of wild horses. Woohoo! And he adapts, It made me think that. But then the idea of participation is one that's big in my experience right now. And I started to realize that's what she's talking about. If you stay in process, it doesn't become an outcome. Therefore, you can't really adapt. You stay in a process, Anyway, so it was really cool to see how the science behind some of these wisdom ideas, these wisdom stories, I can see that there's real actual outcome-based science to it. It's new.
Yeah. I love that. I love the term, right? Just introducing a new
Yes.
term makes us like ask or look at things differently. And then again, like you said, how does it apply? How did I experience this
Yes.
idea?
Yeah.
And remember from the Blue Zone last week, Dan was telling us, the author was telling us that, it wasn't like the centenarians in these amazing areas around the world where they lived to be 100. It wasn't like these individuals said, oh, I'm going to set up my life so that I live to be 100.
Right.
Right. One of the biggest surprises, even to Dan, who was doing, research for decades in these communities around the world, was that these people just lived longer as a result of all those multiple habits they were doing every day, just
Yeah.
as part of their life.
It was their process, not
Their-
their focused on an outcome. Oh, when I get this, or oh, when I get that. And to your point, everything that he wrote, none of them were waking up saying, I need to live a long time.
Right. So, and the beautiful thing was that it not only was their longevity increased, but their well-being was as well. So their health care or their health, what do they call that? Health span. Their health span was also broader. So it was just amazing insights from that book, supporting, the research that Sonja is sharing here. Beautiful. So let's dive in now to the big idea number 2, so the 40% solution. What is this? This is probably the most famous concept from the book. Sonja introduces what became known as the happiness pie. So you might have seen it. This is where she acknowledges that the percentages may not be perfect, but later research points to different numbers, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But the framework, let me just show. So you may see the pie here. You might not see the numbers clearly, but basically, through her research, through the research of identical twin studies, the model suggests that approximately 50% of our happiness set point, so what we're kind of born with, right, our baseline, if we were a thermostat, the natural space where the thermostat is set. So your happiness set point is thought to believe to be set, and that's about 50%, generally influenced by genetics, right? And that about 10% comes from life circumstances, like where you were born, where you live, all these different things. So what you do not have control over, it's just in your life. And then roughly, this is where the 40% comes from, and this is the focus of the whole book. She says that roughly 40% is attributed to come from our intentional activities. Now, here's what struck me. Most of us spend tremendous amount of time and energy trying to improve, guess which portion? The 10%. Thinking about how often do we try to change our jobs to improve, our happiness? How often are we trying to get that next salary raise or get that bigger house or just in some way change our circumstances? So for this book, Sonja Lyubomirsky says that the real opportunity, if we want to expand and really broaden our ability to feel happier, lies in this 40% slice. The part we can influence, the way we think, the goals we pursue, the relationships we nurture, the habits that we practice daily, the meaning making that we create. And one phrase from my notes that I kept returning to was, there's room to maneuver. There's room to grow. There's always room to experiment with one more thing that can influence our experience. This is about hope, my friends. It's about the room to step into, to broaden and cultivate different ways to become happier. I just think it's one of the most helpful messages of the entire book, giving us that sense of hope and agency, how we can be a part of it and not just relegate it to luck of circumstances or luck of some, extraneous things that are outside of our control. So the quote from Sonja is, the fountain of happiness can be found in how you behave, what you think, and what goals you set every day of your life. So again, noticing the emphasis here. Every day, not someday or in the future, not when everything's perfect, but just every day is this beautiful opportunity. One of the things this book repeatedly reinforces is that happiness isn't built through one giant breakthrough. It's built through those tiny daily practices, the daily choices, the tiny actions repeatedly practiced. And doesn't that sound familiar from all our other books? It's exactly what Tom Rath taught us in Eat, Move, Sleep. Together, right? Together. The synchronicity of this, the small choices repeated daily, creates extraordinary outcomes over time. So Colin, let's dive into the 40%. What do you think?
I have to admit, I was shocked when I read this. I really had a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that only 10% of our happiness is based on our circumstance. That just went against everything that I witnessed happening in the world, including my own life. How much I've thought about, oh, if I only lived here, or, oh, if I only had that, oh, if I, all the thinking about stuff and how it would potentially make me more happy. It's only 10% of it. What? It makes it kind of turns everything upside down, you know? And then the idea that, okay, so I can accept that about 50%, background, all that stuff, but then the idea that it's scientifically proven that you can choose more happiness. That's a mind blower.
Right.
That's seriously, that's something that you have to look at and say, oh my goodness. Well, it's like I was saying before, why? Why not? Why are we not doing this?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. This is what I love about these discussions is like there's one idea in a book that's 300 pages and it's like
Right?
if we read the book by ourselves, we might not even remember it tomorrow. But it's when we discuss it and we're like, "Oh my God, did you read that idea?" And "Oh my God, this is changing how I look at myself and the world." And it's like the next question is, how is that going to impact now how I make choices? How is this going to impact me?
Well, I got to tell you, it took me back. Seriously, I hadn't thought about this guy for decades. Decades. I'm talking. I had a mentor in college, businessman, very successful businessman. He was a stock. He had his own firm, and he told me this one day. He says, "Colin, just remember the bird of happiness. You chase the bird of happiness. You'll think this is going to give you happiness over and over." And he was talking about cars and stuff and money and all this stuff. And he says, and every time you get there, it'll fly off again. And this statement that only 10% is based on my circumstances. God, Maggie, I'm like, he was right.
Well, yes, and it's funny how those lessons come back to us at the right time. And Sonia does point to that idea that, we're kind of like raised with that hope.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, yeah, work hard and then you'll get the
And
job.
then you'll get the
Study, then you'll
happiness.
get
Right.
this. Work hard, then you'll get the promotion. Work hard and you can buy the house. So it's like we are kind of programmed that way to go through that treadmill. So the idea of the treadmill is really good because it's just like we're always adapting. And so to know that there were studies that looked into what are the determinants of happiness,
Yeah.
what are the factors that contribute to it, right?
Yeah.
So, that's important to have an idea of that circle of the slices of pie, right? So that we have a concept that some things are out of our control, some things are within our control. But the biggest idea is that there are pathways that if we can step in and be active participants, we have a much bigger impact in our opportunity to experience moments of happiness sequentially more often every day. But I want to share some I want to be real with you now because this book was written when 2007.
Mm,
And the field of positive psychology is exploding, and there
yeah.
are researchers left and right doing studies every day. And we're not here to share the latest research findings. We're just here to share some big ideas from a book and to encourage you to, pick up the book and look into it. But here's the thing. Since this published book was written, there have been many, many other articles. And Sonia has also started to do additional studies. And so we want to give you an idea that the initial numbers may not be accurate. That in fact, the set point in some studies have been shown to be as high as 70 to 80%.
Meaning what we're thinking of as 50% right now?
Right. So the 50% may be as high as 70 to 80.
Oh,
So
wow.
the circumstance may be 5%. How we can actually influence this is maybe 10 or 20%. But so now the updated version. So I hope that's not blowing your mind.
No, no.
The thing with science is that scientists are always saying this is what we know with what we have researched, and then as soon as we know better, we update those theories and we
Right.
get the word out there. So the idea is to say what was known when this book was published, and then to say, we continue to look into this. They continue to study it, and so the biggest finding now. We'll share the article in the YouTube channel under the comments so you can look at it from the Greater Good Science group. And they shared some additional, more recent findings on that point that the 40% may be way overestimated. It may be lower, like 20% or less. But here's the thing. They said, we are not easily divisible like three slices
No.
of a pie, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So our circumstances impact our genetics, right? We talk
Right.
about lifestyle and health, how our genes can be triggered on and off for disease and things like that. But the big part is to say that everything impacts everything, just like we learned in Eat, Move, Sleep, right? How
Yeah.
you eat gives you the energy to then move, and then moving helps you to have better energy and sleep better. So, in a similar way, they're looking at the interconnection of those three core areas of everybody is unique. So, that's a big point of the book that's remaining, right? Sonja says everybody's unique. And here's the cool thing, the focus now is on awareness. Are we happy? How happy are we? Are we in the negative? Are we neutral? Or are we already moving along the spectrum of flourishing? And if we're curious about moving the needle, we're going to move to the next idea on this around having a personal fit approach, honoring that everybody is unique. I love it. So, we'll get into the discussion, but any ideas before we move into idea number 3?
Yeah, I'm glad you added that last part because frankly, coming into the conversation knowing we were going to talk about this, it feels to me, that feels intuitively that what you just described as the new studies, I that's where I kind of leaned anyway, is I lean towards, the home you grew up in, the patterning you received from your parents, your DNA. I kind of already leaned that, but I do have to admit, like I was telling you about my own experience with my own siblings, etc., that you can have even my own children. You can have people grow up in pretty much the same environment, and they're going to interpret things differently. The thing that I'm still really excited about in this book are two ideas. One, my circumstances have a lot less to do with my happiness than I thought. And two, that I can actually cultivate it like any other habit or pattern that I've got. I can cultivate happiness, and that's proven scientifically. Those are good things no matter what percentages they are.
And that's the main takeaway, right?
Yeah.
Science going to keep evolving to change the numbers, to, button it up. But the main idea is, you said, the awareness, and then the idea that we can actually do something about it. We're
Yeah.
not helpless. So hopefully let's put our curiosity hat on
Mm,
and, begin to look at what are we focusing on? The things we can't do anything about, or the pathways that we could move forward
yeah.
to feel happier. Cool. All
Cool.
right. So, with that, let's go ahead and move on to big idea number 3, which is the idea that there is no one path to happiness. Sonja encourages us to find your best fit. My favorite idea, I think, of the entire book, because it reminds me that there is no single path to health or happiness. Recognizing there's no universal strategy, no magic formula, no one size fits all solution. So Sonja introduces a concept she calls person activity fit. And I absolutely love this idea. She argues that one of the main reasons people fail to become happier is because they choose strategies that don't fit who they are. They don't honor who they are. They might be doing things because their family's doing it, or their friends are doing it, or their coworkers are doing it, right? So she says, let's honor the fact that there are just different paths to flourish, and that she invites us to experiment. Just try them out. Practice how you feel when you do these different activities that she shares in part 2 of the book. And as I read part 2 of the book, where she goes over 12 happiness activities, the categories, it really just reminded me about Ayurveda. I can't help it. I bring Ayurveda into everything, right? And the old maxim of old wisdom traditions to say, know thyself. Know yourself first, who you are as in your nature, as your essence. Knowing your strengths, your values, what season of life you're in. So these types of self-knowledge become really, really important. And even though she doesn't go into these in the book, that's the lens that, of course, I'm going to be looking through it. So she focuses on looking at the strengths. Let strengths guide choices. And that once we achieve a sense of happiness, the idea that we're not done, that we need to also continue to sustain these practices. What's going to keep us in that sort of happiness sweet spot? So recognizing what's the best happiness strategy for me and for you. It might be totally different. And I just think that's the beautiful, beautiful part about that. A profoundly important distinction. So writing for yourself, what helps you flourish? Is it moving more? Is it sleeping? Is it eating a beautiful meal? Is it spending time with loved ones? Is it practicing your love languages? Is it practicing putting your values into action? So just explore and collect the data, because that's what we do here. So Aristotle says different men seek after happiness in different ways. So how long have we been thinking of this idea? More than 2 millennia ago. This quote beautifully summarizes this entire idea that there is the universality of seeking happiness and at the same time acknowledging the uniqueness of our individual paths along the way. So there's no universal path. Some people find joy through relationships, others through service, creativity, spirituality, or learning like we love here. We're lovers of books and learning. So the invitation is not to copy someone else's path, but to have fun and explore discovering your own path.
This makes sense. I think about the 5 love languages or whatever. That people are just different. And obviously there are different things that you can do. But I love the fact that she's done the study, done the work to say, here are ways that have been proven to cultivate happiness. Find a way. She doesn't try to say, okay, here's how to do all 12 tomorrow, whatever. She says, try them out. And frankly, just reading the list, I could see right from the list that there's probably a few on there that I'm going to never do. they're not going to bring me happiness. But there are some on there that I saw, oh, I'm already doing that. Oh, I'm already doing that. Or I'm already doing that. So the thing I liked is, because you and I both have had friends, family who have been in a moment where maybe they were struggling with happiness or depression or whatever. The concept of a hedonic adaptation, this idea that you're going to get past it, that in the midst of profound grief or loss, it does feel like the end of the world. Mm-hmm. Or even in the midst of profound, I won something or I got what I wanted, mm-hmm. That whole idea that the thing that you were wanting so badly and you got it, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, what do I do now? The fact that she gives a path forward that says, try this stuff, get in the process. And I think that's, of all the things I'm taking away from this, is don't look for outcomes to provide long-term happiness, because you're going to hedonically adapt and then you're going to have to go look for another outcome. Get in the process, wake up every day, be in the journey, all that stuff. It's, it almost sounds like a Hallmark card advertisement, but it's real. Yeah.
It's when we finally see the meaning in these corny statements, right?
Yeah.
And she kind of starts that way to talk about the book. It's like, as a scientist, I was kind of shy about going into this field because a lot of people think, all those, like you said, greeting card statements, they're corny. Why would I want to scientifically, study and
Right.
validate why people are happy? So she goes into the science. It's all about the science. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about that because this book isn't written to be read all the way through. It's really
Mm.
like a
Yeah.
handbook of
Reference.
happiness, right?
It's one of the reasons why I decided to take her quizzes at her website because I was curious to see what questions she would ask to assess, be able to tell me back, oh, you're happy, So it's interesting when we get into the mechanics of happiness.
Yep. Yep. It is. So she's no joke. She says, okay, take this test. Do not go beyond this
Mhm.
page before you
Mhm.
take the test because
Mhm.
this is what we tend to do. We're so busy, we're so hurried. We just want to get right in there and start practicing one of them. And that's the number one hazard, right? Don't just jump in and do something. Know why this activity might be good for you or why it wouldn't be. Instead of like wasting your energy and getting frustrated and just thinking, look, I'll never be happy because I tried that. I tried journaling, I
Yeah.
tried gratitude, I tried whatever, and we think it doesn't work. So she says, take the test. And I'm glad you did it online. I did it in the
Mhm.
book, and I had
Mm.
to get a calculator to do the
Well,
testing.
then I'm glad I did it my way because she did all the math.
You have to get average and reverse scoring. And it was so funny. It's like, I didn't do this since college. Oh my God. So she provides the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire, first of all. So always doing that one, right? And then she provides a very extensive quiz so that you can identify the top 4 happiness activities in section 2 for you. So this is where you get the personal fit happiness activity. So
Right.
do not pass go until you do that quiz. Otherwise, why are you doing that activity?
Right.
So that is just such a gift for this book to begin to answer or ask, who am I? Where am I on my journey of happiness? There are some questions like, what does she actually ask? It's like wanting to know kind of where you're at, what kind of happiness or unhappiness are you at, and what kind of activity do you want to look at? These types of things. So there's guidelines, my friends. If you really want to just explore how to bring greater happiness to yourself, your family, your friends, your coworkers, and then dive into those top 4. And interestingly enough, she shares that there are 3 universally important happiness practices. And if you don't look close enough, you might miss it. So those 3 that apply to most people we'll share in a slide in a moment. But it's practicing gratitude, forgiveness, and investing in relationships. Kind of makes sense, right? We're all human.
Yeah.
We have this relational, we talked about the importance of community and support in the blue zones. And then the idea of practicing gratitude, love of self, empathy, and then forgiveness. Kind of taking away that kryptonite, right? That brings about all those negative stuff to our mind and body. But so much goodness in this. So let's do a quick recap. We've talked about so many ideas. So if we look at a quick overview of the big ideas we reviewed today, is happiness is cultivated. It's not assumed, it's something we step into, and it requires action. And then the 40% solution, we've now updated it, my friends. So it doesn't really matter on the 40%, 80%. The idea is we are active participants. While there are factors that are out of our control, there is still hope by placing our awareness on what we can do and by dedicating ourselves to number 3, finding our best fit and then committing to taking those actions daily. One of the biggest ideas she shares is that happiness isn't found, it's cultivated, my friends. So, a share today for everyone is an overview of these 12 practices. Again, the top 3 that she mentioned on the left are 3 practices for everyone to dive into and do. So you can begin with those 3 or hop into those top 4 of the ones to explore your best fit. For some people, some of the top 3 practices will be some of your top 4. So you'll be able to double dip and get the benefit of that. But the important thing is to really honor the best fit. And then she says to go all in, try all of the different subtypes of practices that you can do within each of these activities. And then reflect. How is this impacting me? Am I feeling more energy, more happiness? Because if we can just improve a tiny little bit, if we can feel a little better, most likely we're going to make better choices. And the idea that we shared last time in the blue zones is when we start connecting these small habits that make us feel better and we make better choices, we can hop onto that upward spiral that connects us with higher and higher levels of higher energy and better moods. So I just love that about that. So you can take a snapshot of that. And again, reflection for yourself. Which of these practices do you think you might be most aligned with who you are and where you are right now in your happiness expression? Not your set point, what you're kind of born with, but right now, how you're showing up on a regular basis. And you can just take a hunch, but we encourage you to get the book and to take the quiz for that personal fit. And the last share is happiness experiments. So for each of the categories of happiness activities, once you find your right fit, she offers many different happiness experiments, such as some of the ones here. Like we may be familiar with some of these, right? Writing a gratitude note. I mean, how many people get a handwritten note these days, right? Maybe reconnect with a friend, just call them up. Practice a random act of kindness. Find out those activities where you feel yourself lost in that activity, the flow activity, and then schedule more of those times. And so you can take another snapshot of this one or get the book to dive in for more goodness. The goal, again, is not to do all of them. Review these 10 here and maybe just pick one. Pick one to really just explore it and then experiment with how does this work for you? What energizes you? And then begin to more clearly identify what activities really help you to flourish. So to wrap up, we can look at this menu and just jot down which one will you explore. Who's going to get the book and who's going to take the quiz to find more of that clarity around personal fit happiness activities. So Colin, let me come back to you and see if you have any final shares around these activities or what your next step might be.
Well, the out of the list, it was no surprise to me to have it be the top 3 to look a lot like or about relationship, because the blue zones, which we spoke about, that was the one common denominator, which led to the conversation about the Harvard lifetime study that's been going on. It doesn't surprise me that invested relationships, which include gratitude and forgiveness, right? Kind of hit the top of the charts, and that it's comforting, right? It's comforting to know that from all these different perspectives, one thing that's ubiquitous is relationship really carries the day when it comes to happiness, to longevity, to what we're doing here. No matter what your core beliefs are, how you show up in relationship again and again and again shows that it's really important, just really important.
I do love that. Recognizing, even from ancient traditions, the
Mm-hmm.
idea of the duality of life as we understand ourselves and others, the two sides of the coin, of happiness or, challenges. There's always going to be a change. It's how we respond to life,
Yep. Yep.
All these books kind of weave that same tradition from Viktor Frankl, all of these books that we've looked at in a different way. So this book is really all about the science. And again, science can apply to a group of people. It may not apply to you as an individual, But in general, these approaches give us some insights and ideas to consider. And the biggest part is action, right? To give us hope that we're not destined to feel like we are right now. There are determinants of happiness, just like there are determinants of health, right? If we smoke,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't sleep, if we do a lot of toxins in our body, these are determinants of risk factors, right, for health. So if we look at it with that science view, it's like, wow, I can be a scientist in my own life, put on that lab coat and begin to enjoy
Yeah.
experimenting with some of these person fit happiness activities. Woo! Look at that. Look at that, right? A new
Mhm.
idea.
Yeah.
And so with that, my friends, the idea in this Cafecito chat is we gather together, not just to review books, even though we love books and we love the ideas. This is our happy place where we express the love of learning. And as we gather together, as we learn from each other, and then put that idea of what's next. As we move from insight into action, we invite you to consider reading more, sharing more ideas, and committing to living more intentionally. So as always, we wrap up and we invite you to consider your +1, your -1. So from our heroic community, we always look to invite you, what's one simple idea you'd like to explore today to begin to practice and put into place in your life? Or what's one thought or habit that you want to stop that might be draining your energy or your happiness? So this is all about cultivating happiness. Happiness is not found. And cultivation always involves both planting and pruning. So commit to starting something or stopping something today. So we want to thank you, my friends, for joining in today to Cafecito Chats. We'd love to invite you to scan the code and join us in our private WhatsApp chat to continue the conversation, where you'll receive weekly book summaries, some reflections and extra shares throughout the weeks, and ongoing book conversations. Plus, you'll get links to the previous Cafecito chats. So welcome and join us, a community of fellow lifelong learners. And if today's conversation resonated with you, please scan the QR code and join us next week, where we'll be looking at Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So one of my favorite ways to close this is just to say thank you for joining us. Again, we're not here to wait or postpone our sense of happiness. We don't assume that happiness lives somewhere in the future. From what we've learned today in this beautiful book of The How of Happiness, we can begin today. One thought, one practice, one conversation, one intentional action. So from us in the Cafecito chat to you, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Colin, for being here. Thank you, everyone who is joining us online. And join us next week, where we'll conclude our June series with the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Until next time, keep reading, keep reflecting, and keep sharing. And remember, here in Cafecito chat, we pause not to stop, pivot to what matters. Thanks so much for joining in. See you next week. Bye.